Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Luck in Misery, written by ImJustaNormalReddit. Gorok was hungry. He was walking along this countryside road in the rain. It had been hours since he'd last passed a gas station. It was too late to turn back, and he didn't have any money left. Just by luck, he sighed. Not only had he been discharged for refusing to execute unreasonable orders, he couldn't find any job in the cities due to the stain on his failed career. Fight is the only thing he knew, and the jobs who could take him didn't like his insubordination. So he found himself walking to the next city. He saved funds exhausted before he could purchase a travel pass. He rubbed his 4 scaly arms to chase the cold. His clothes were wet, and his pack was starting to feel heavy. Gorok looked around him at the winding roads following the rolling hills covered in harvester cranes for what he could see in the darkness. At this point, he felt miserable and a little desperate. Was he destined to die here in the middle of nowhere? He found it ironic that the mightiest species of the galaxy was in such a pitiful state. Stranded in a world he wasn't familiar with, for following his beliefs. His meaty arms didn't fit regular work and would impede his dexterous arms otherwise. He was only a quarter of his lifespan, and he felt like he wouldn't live long like this. His parents must feel ashamed to have a son who's so pathetic that he can't help himself. Gorok continued to trudge through the pouring rain, occasionally wiping his brow and stout muzzle of water. As he crested the next hill, something caught his eye. There, through the rain, he saw a faint glow of a light. He stopped to observe for a moment. When the glow didn't move, he was glad that it wasn't a vehicle, as they were too small to fit him. Quickening his pace, he went on until he was parallel to the light from the road. He was standing at the end of the dirt road to a wooden farmhouse and barn. The light was shining through the ground floor windows like a beacon he was hopeful to hang on to. Shuddering in the night, he gazed for a moment before deciding to try his chance. With his species' reputation, they most likely would turn him down. Carefully stepping on the creaking stairs on the front porch, he looked more closely to the details. The beings residing here seemed to be an average height, but the door would indicate a stance less wide than the norm. The handle appears to be made for dexterous hands, and the steps were smaller feet than his. Those indicate too few species, but he'll need to see them. They must not have a translator here, like half the people in the cities he passed through. Luckily, he learned a few dialects. Hopefully, the residents are amongst those he knows. With one of his secondary hands, he gently knocked at the door. A few moments later, he heard a gruff voice in speech he half recognized. The door opened slightly, revealing most of the middle-aged Terran staring at him suspiciously, a hand obviously holding onto a big object behind the door. "Well, you're a big one, ain't you?" he said. Gorok understood most of the sentence, but he cursed his luck. The Terran languages are ones he knows the less. He will have to try his best. "What a little lad like you doing out here?" he continued, still partly covered by the door. Gorok tried to answer slowly, to be sure not to forget his words. "Sir, I am only traveler. I am hungry. I will work for a warm meal and a place to rest." The man looked him up and down before saying, "Boy, I have no place for you." Gorok's shoulders slumped at those words. Deep down, he knew that he would be refused, but he still grabbed at that shred of hope he was. "I understand," he said quietly. Lowering his head, he breathed out in resignation. This may be the last being he talks to in his life. He knew he won't survive the night as it is, but he wouldn't force the hand of a man who didn't do anything bad. So he prepared to leave again. But as he was going to say his thanks, the Terran interjected. "Hold a sec," he said, then closed the door. Different voices were heard through the door. Gorok recognized the Terran who opened the door, but the other was unknown to him. He couldn't understand what was said due to the muffling effect of the door, but he guessed it was about him. A few seconds later, the Terran opened the door again, pointed to the floor while looking at him, and said, "Wait here." Then he closed the door back. Korok was a little confused, but he wasn't going to refuse a reprieve off the rain. He unshouldered his travel pack and leaned it against the wall, then sat cross-legged on the wooden planks. He idly stroked his arm to warm himself as he stared in melancholy at the raining darkness. He was so caught in his misery that he didn't hear the front door open and the pitter-patter of light feet approaches. He was surprised when his ears suddenly picked up a new voice, one he hadn't heard before, that sounded quite young and excited. "Whoa!" the little voice exclaimed in a whisper. Korok's eyes widened at the unique reaction he provoked. Carefully, he turned his head towards the door and the owner of the voice, standing just as far as their little arms reached. There, standing slightly shorter than Korok was sitting, was a Terran youngling that had the piercing eyes of their father and beautiful golden hair glittering from the house light. They had an expression of pure amazement and wonder. Korok, knowing how terrifying his form can be, was frozen in place in worry. He knew he could snap the young's neck with his brawny arms without effort if he wasn't careful. So he moved only his head as carefully as he could. He looked into the youngling's eyes and strangely found no trace of fear. "Are you a shark?" the youngling asked excitedly. Korok found himself unsure of what to do. He never talked with younglings before. They all stayed far away from him whenever he was around. So he tried the only thing that he could think of, trying to not show his teeth. Korok softly answered with a question of his own. "What is shark?" At those words, the youngling beamed their brightest smile and excitedly explained. "You see, sharks are these big fish with a big tail like this." They mimed with their hands behind their back. And big fins like this." They waved their arms wildly. Oh, and big teeths. Oh, like yours, mister." The youngling pointed at Korok's mouth. He wasn't sure if it was a real animal or not, but his ancestors did evolve from sea-dwelling animals. If there was some like those here, he didn't know, but the youngling's passion is probably for a real creature. He was about to respond when the youngling cut in with another question. "Why do you have 4 arms? Can I touch them?" Korok was once again surprised by the eagerness the young showed, not the least bit afraid of what he was. Still, he kept in mind how dangerous he can be and did not want to hurt them. No, I am scary." The youngling tilted their head in confusion. "But you're so pretty," they argued. Korok felt conflicted. He knew it was only a matter of time before the youngling sees how scary he really is. But he longed for some kind of kinship. Luckily, he didn't have to think too much, since the Terran he talked to before came back to the door. "What in the Mer-Ka-Ba? What are you doing out here?" The little girl ran back to her father with stars in her eyes. Daddy, can I touch him?" The man quickly glanced at Korok, then back down at his daughter. "Mer-Ka-Ba, now you know what I said about strangers, yeah?" he chastised. "But the mister looked so lonely," she protested. "Mer-Ka-Ba, the mister was just taking cover from the rain," he continued. "What? But," she hesitated. "Mer-Ka-Ba," the man repeated sternly. "Okay," the girl said with a dejected face. She looked at Korok again and said softly, "Bye, mister," and then stepped back inside. The Terran watched her go out of view and closed the back door. At this point, Korok returned to look into the void while the man approached, stopping beside him. He placed a plate in front of Korok. "Do you need silverware?" the man asked, designating the warm meal. Korok raised one of his slender hands. "Please," he answered. "Ah, good," the Terran said, handing him the cutlery before crossing his arms. "'Twill be less messy like this. Bon appetit." He finished his language that Korok didn't know, but he took the silverware and ate nonetheless. It was delicious. It had been a while since he ate meat this good. Once done, he gingerly placed back the plate and cutlery in front of him. "Many thanks," he said to the Terran with a bow. The latter stroked his auburn beard with a faint smile on his lips. "Well, I'll be. You weren't kidding. You really been that hungry since it's been a while since someone enjoyed my roast beef that much," the man said with a chuckle. "Apologies," Korok responded. "I not eat since last city." The Quarren arched an eyebrow. "Since the last city? Which one?" Korok pointed to where he came from. Right on? Zeron?" The man uncrossed his arms, surprised. "Azeton? You came all the way from there?" Korok nodded. The Terran leaned back with a heavy laugh. Well, I'll be. Be a walk for 2 days. No wonder you were hungry, boy. Korak was not sure how to take this, so he waited. Don't worry, boy. It just shows you're hardy. The man turned around and opened the door. Many thanks? Korak hesitated as he saw the man enter his home. He wondered if it was time for him to go, but he saw the Terran exit as soon as he entered with 2 long sticks made of fabric in hand. Standing again beside Korak, he presented one of the sticks to him. I trust you know how to use an umbrella? He asked. Korak wasn't sure, since he only knew the magnetic umbrellas, but he guessed they fundamentally worked the same. He nodded and took the handle with the slender hand. He examined the object for a second, then pressed the button at the end of the fabric. What he wasn't ready for was the fabric to spring open in his face. Surprised, he let go of the umbrella, who fell down on the porch into the drenched grass. Embarrassed at his poor display, Korak hid his face behind his meaty palms while the Terran laughed. Wait here, I'll bring it back, he said between breaths, opening his own umbrella and stepping into the rain. Korak on his part shook his head and grabbed his pack. Standing up, he took back the umbrella the Terran handed to him again, opening it safely and joining the man on the lawn. Many thanks, he said to the Terran, who smiled at him. Come, follow me, he said, then walked towards the barn. Korak followed, but the wet ground underneath his feet was making him shiver again. You're a very polite boy, the Terran said, distracting him from his sorry state, which he was thankful for. I study. Parents raise also, he answered. The man whistled a note, then said, is how you learned English? I learned many languages, Korak recalled. That's good work so far. He paused as he opened the barn door. Can you fit through here? He asked. Korak felt a wave of warm air coming from inside. He closed the umbrella and leaned forward. It would be tight, but he could pass if he goes sideways. Once under the roof, the man showed him an empty stall full of straw. You can sleep here tonight. Since your clothes are wet, you should hang them to dry, he added, pointing at a horizontal pole and beams. He then looked down at Korak's feet. I suppose claws like that. You can't wear shoes, right? Korak nodded, but didn't add anything. Well, that won't be a problem then, the Terran continued. If you get too cold still, he walked to another stall to pat an equine. This is Harold. Then he waved at the cow in the nearby stall, lazily munching on silage. And that there is Gary. They will keep you warm. Korak was eternally grateful for the kindness, but could only respond with, many thanks. The Terran waved him off with a clap on his brawny shoulder. Enough of that. You said you'll work for it. So if you're still here tomorrow when I come, you'll work. Korak felt uneasy now, since he obviously couldn't work as a laborer. Apologies, sir. I only know fight. I know not how to help. The man looked at him for a moment with an unreadable look before smiling back again. Well, boy, that's not a problem. These big arms of yours can surely load a ton. You'll learn in no time. The name is Albert, he said, pointing a thumb at his chest, then waved to Korak. What do I call you? Name, yes, Korak whispered. Introductions always should be given. My name is Korak, he said carefully, trying to enunciate all the words correctly. Albert offered a hand with a warm smile. Korak knew of this practice, since he studied most common customs of many species. So, with one of his slender hands, he grasped the man's own, and a firm handshake was given. Nice to meet you, the man said, releasing his hold. Now I'm going to go let you rest, and I'll see you tomorrow, he waved, then went back out into the rain. Korak, now alone with his thoughts, wondered how long this would last. Probably only for the morning. He was not a skilled worker, after all. He wasn't raised to tend the fields or beasts. Few of his kin were. He doubted Albert will keep him after he knows his story, but at least he will not die today. Korak hung his wet vestments to dry and lay down on the straw. He had doubts, but he found himself to be glad for once. Maybe he will try his best here. With those thoughts, he closed his eyes to rest. And for once in a long while, Korak had a peaceful sleep with beautiful dreams. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Bushmaster 177, Henry the Red, Caspar Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon WRE, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.